On today's episode, we'll be discussing the do's and don'ts of starting a business. And today we have a very special guest, Miss Erin Johnson, who will be joining us in discussion. And one of the things, when we first start off with a business, we're very eager, we're very passionate about making a whole lot of money, getting the business started, creating this lifestyle for our families. And one of the things though that we want to concentrate on are the fundamental principles of how to successfully start a business. And so Miss Erin will be joining us in that conversation and discussion on today.
So for listeners and myself, what are some of the initial things that you should do when you are beginning to start your business or embark on your journey of starting a business?
Well, that's a great question. I think it all starts with creating the vision. And so that starts with having a proper business plan in place. And so with the business plan, one of the first things that you want to ultimately do is to identify a need. Where is there a problem? What do I see that needs to ultimately be solved? And so when you identify a need and then you create a solution on how to solve that particular problem, that's the key towards a successful business, and then ultimately creating that business plan which will detail what that vision looks like and how you plan on being successful, who your target audience is, who your customers are, who you plan on serving, where and how you plan on serving them. So the very first thing is ultimately to start with a great business plan. And so another thing I think is very important is that once you have that business plan established, is you should then create the proper formation of that particular business. So there's different types of business formation that you can ultimately create, whether it's an LLC, S corp, C corp, sole prop, and so you have to identify what's best for you. What I would usually suggest for people that are ultimately starting out is to go with an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. It helps provide limited liability. So when it comes to certain exposure on the personal side versus the business, you're able to separate your personal liability or exposure. So that's why it's important that you have to actually form this business so that you become separate from the actual business. So if things go wrong, or if a customer is unsatisfied and you get into some sort of lawsuit or litigation, then having that properly formed business will help provide you greater protection in the long run.
So I'm glad you spoke about creating the LLC. So where could we go to find more research information about that? Because nowadays a lot of people are on social media. They have this thing called LLC Twitter, which is a lot of people feeling like they are knowledgeable and credible when it comes to business related things and things you should do. But where could I go to just find information on the different types of businesses and how I can get my business set up?
Well, at HDA Coaching, you can go to hdacoaching.com and you can ultimately apply for a business success in a box. And so we have a program that ultimately will help walk you through those steps, step by step, and actually create the business for you. But you can always do your own research. You can go to Google, but you ultimately have to identify the state that you're in and go to that. Usually it's going to be the Secretary of State with whatever state that you're ultimately in, and they will guide you through the steps of how to form a business in that particular state. So it varies a little bit state by state, but we can help you at HDA Coaching with that particular process of setting that business up correctly and properly. But you can also do your own research and ultimately identify how to properly start a business in your respective state.
And so my next question is, going back again, I know a lot of people, they don't have an LLC, they don't have anything like that set up. Do you feel as though it's even possible to successfully run your business without having that set up?
That's a good question. I believe that without having that set up, you don't have a true quote unquote business. And really you have a personal a personal endeavor, I guess, that you are partaking in that ultimately may create income or revenue. But when it comes to an actual business and what a business actually means without having it properly formed, then you don't have an official business. So I do believe that in order to have an official business and to position yourself for having access to capital, and being able to take advantages of being a business, you ultimately have to have the proper foundation in place. Also, from a tax perspective, there's certain pros and cons of ultimately having a business versus ultimately carrying all of that income and revenue that you receive just on your personal checking account or within your own personal income. So in order to be successful as a business and a successful entrepreneur, it ultimately starts by forming an actual business. Also, it's very important that once you form that particular business and you register it with the Secretary of State in which you're going to operate out of, that you ultimately set up a business bank account, a business checking account. And you want to separate, your funds and your expenses, personal versus business. That's very, very, very important to ultimately do. So you don't want to, get in the habit of, commingling funds, your personal funds with your business funds. But there may be certain times where you may have to, especially starting out, you may have to provide a loan to your business, but it's a loan to your business. That's what it ultimately is. And so you want to have that properly, documented. So another important aspect is ultimately organizing a proper financial structure for your business. So making sure that you have, an accounting system in place. And also, with that is that will show you how and where you're making money. So it's going to identify, hey, how many customers I ultimately have, what's my revenue, these are my expenses. So am I ultimately making a profit at the end of the day once I add all of my costs in? And so sometimes what happens is, just because we have income or revenue coming in through the door, we think that we're making a profit. But if let's just say if we have $1,000 coming in, and at that point in time we say, hey, I made $1,000. But at the end of the day, if I have, let's just say, rent of $1,000 a month or $500 a month, and it costs me $400 to ultimately order, the supplies for the product and service that I'm rendering, then at the end of the day, $500 plus another $400 or $500, I'm ultimately either at a break-even point of I have $1,000 in expenses versus $1,000 in revenue. I'm only breaking even. I'm not really making any money. Or if my expenses ultimately supersede my revenue, then I'm losing money. So it's very, very important to have a proper accounting system in place to make sure that you know how to make money in terms of what your profitability is and how you can ultimately even increase that profitability even more by looking at my expenses, where can I cut, how can I be more effective and more efficient. And so it's very, very important that we have a proper financial structure in place.
So in regards to the financial structure, do you have any suggestions on any tools or resources that we could use or any upcoming business owners can use if they have no idea on where to start or which direction to look in order for them to get started? They know like you said, they know they're making revenue, they know they're actually making money, but they have no way of organizing that and keeping track of that.
Well, I believe that a person should ultimately always be on the brink of continuous improvement and continuous learning as a business owner. So you want to learn, the ins and outs of your business. And so I believe that, you can find, a CPA, or you can find a coach or a program. We have a program at HGA Coaching, which is a virtual CFO service in which we help set up, that particular structure for a business owner. And we also teach you and coach you how to review your financial statements to become more profitable, and you can see where you're making money, where you're losing money. But it's very, very important that you take time. So whether that may be as well, whether it's books, whether it's online, courses and training of, financial statements, balance sheets. It's very important that you allocate time and make the investment into learning more about the financial side of that particular business, because every business, no matter what it ultimately is, it's to provide a service. But the only way that you can continue that business is by having the proper financial setup and structure, and you have to be making money at the end of the day to continue the business for years and for generations to ultimately come. So if you don't understand your numbers or know what they are, then it's going to be hard to sustain this particular business. At the end of the day, if you're losing more money than you're ultimately bringing in, then it's not really going to be sustainable. And so there's so many businesses that ultimately fail and close. There's a high rate of failure for businesses, and two of the main reasons why businesses fail: one is lack of capital, adequate financing to ultimately start up and to run that particular business, and the second is just lack of financial management. And so that's where, as I mentioned, HGA coaching can come into place, and provide that financial management and that insight to being properly set up and structured from a financial perspective. One of the last things I'll also, share and discuss, I think is so important in starting a business, is to build your business credit. And there's this misnomer out there that just because I've been in business a certain amount of time or a certain number of years, that I'm automatically building my business credit, and that's not accurate. That's not true. There's certain steps that have to be taken in order to build that business credit. And building business credit is key because it allows you to gain access to different lines of credit. And so what that ultimately will allow you to do, it helps to improve your cash flow. So that means that basically, instead of having to front money up front, you can ultimately pay things over time with different lines of credit. So let's just say that if I have a business and I need to order 5 computers to get started, and let's say that the computers are hypothetically speaking, the computers are $1,000 a piece. So if I need 5 computers at $1,000 a piece, that's $5,000 that ultimately, if I'm starting up or wherever it is that I'm in my business, whether I'm startup or established, I've got to ultimately front $5,000 and pay for these computers today if I want to order these computers. And then it's going to take some time in order for those computers to ultimately get in. All that, time is money in business. And so with a line of credit, what will take place is ultimately I can place that order, put it on credit, and for that duration of time, that month or whatever it may be, I can ultimately have my computers, use my computers to help create more revenue to then ultimately pay, the balance on that particular bill, and I can pay it off over time. So instead of having to front load, revenue, or pay out revenue, pay out something up front, I can ultimately use that line of credit, which will help my cash flow, because there's other things that are going to take place in the course of that month, because I need supplies as well. So when it comes to supplies, okay, well, if you're using all of your cash every month to pay for supplies, then that's going to limit your ability to scale and to grow. So you want to put certain things on credit to help protect your cash and your cash flow.
So with all the information that you shared, and just for listeners and upcoming business owners, do you feel as though these are essential to your success? Because I know a lot of the times people feel as though they can bypass certain things, so they don't have to get it now, they can get it later. So how do you feel? Do you feel as though this is essential, and with these steps, if you do them properly, you do them right away before you actually begin your business, that you'll be successful?
I feel like each person has to ask themselves a question. Do I ultimately want to be exceptional in my craft? Do I want to do things with excellence? And do I want to be the very best at what it is that I ultimately do? Whether that is business, whether that is parenting, whether that is being, a devoted, spouse or partner, whatever it may ultimately be, do I want to be the very best at what I do? And so if you ask yourself that question, then the same thing applies as it relates to how I go about business. So if I want to be the very best at business, I can't expect to give a 50% effort and then, expect for this, this exceptional amount of sustainable success. You may create some success, in a short period of time, but when it comes to being sustainable, you have to have the proper foundation in order to scale, in order to grow, and to be the very best at what it is that you do. So my thought process is, in whatever it is that we do, we should always strive to do what we do with a sense of excellence and to be the very best entrepreneur, the very best business owner, and we should have the proper structure and the proper systems in place in order to create success. So when we look at, major companies that we may, admire, whether it's Chick-fil-A, the Netflixes, the Googles, the Facebooks, or whoever it may be, when you look at these particular companies, understand that at a certain point in time, they started off small.